In this lesson, we will learn how to add our video to the render queue and some common output settings that we can use to watch our video on our own computer or post it on the web. Okay, so I've gone back through here and just tweaked a couple more little things here at the very end, and now I'm ready to add my video to the render queue. So to do that, you're going to come up here to Composition, and you want to be in the composition that you're wanting to add to the render queue. So you'll notice down here in my tabs, I've closed out everything just so there's no confusion. We want to render out our main composition. So once you have that all ready, go ahead and come up here and click Add to Render Queue. And that's going to open up the Render Queue tab just in the same way that we have any other tab open on our timeline. But this is different, and this is the place that a lot of motion graphics artists get tripped up. So I want to give you just a quick overview of the settings that you'll need if you want to have smooth playback on your computer. Now, things may change a little bit if you're wanting to stream on the web or you have some other final place that you want your video to live. So you're always going to want to do a little bit of research whenever you have a specific place that you're wanting to output your video to. Now, the default settings that you get whenever you add something to the render queue are not going to be settings that you'll be able to use if you want to play back the video on your computer. This lossless setting is a setting that gives you no compression whatsoever, and it's just going to create a video that you really won't be able to use for anything other than more editing. So if you wanted to render out your video and bring it back into After Effects or some other editing program, that's when you would use just that default setting there. So we want to go in and change our settings up so that we are able to see this video in a way that would be able to just watch it on our computer. So let's go ahead and click on this first option here, the Render Settings Best Settings. Now, normally I don't come in here and change anything. I want to go ahead and make sure I'm set to best quality, full resolution, which is going to be this size here. And you really just want to make sure that you're using your comp's frame rate as long as you're happy with everything that you did in your composition. Now, in special cases, and definitely not for the way that we set up our video, you may end up changing the frame rate here. But for the most part, using the best settings for these render settings are going to give you the best results. So I'm going to just go ahead and click OK in this dialog box, and then we're going to move down to the output module. So you want to click lossless, and that's going to give us our output module settings. This is where we're going to do the most tweaking to get a format that's going to look good on your computer and possibly on the web. So we'll come up here first to the format, and I want to show you the H.264 format. This is going to be one of the most universally able to be played back formats that you could choose. So this is the one that I like to use, and it really just gives you an MP4 file. So that's going to be able to be viewed on a Mac or a PC. It's really easy to just get everybody on the same page with that kind of format. Now, I'm happy with everything I have here for the RGB, millions of colors, and the pre-multiply matted, so I'm not going to mess with that at all, but I do want to come in here to my format options, and we'll talk a little bit about this. So whenever you are defaulting to those default H.264 values, it's important just to make sure that you have this set up properly. Now, right now, I've gone in and put in all these values just so that we can talk about them. I always like to use the high profile here for the codec that you see there, and then I'm going to always use the highest 5.1 level for this setting here, and that's really just going to give you the best results with no kind of compression artifacts. Now let's talk about the bitrate encoding and a little bit about the difference between CBR and VBR. CBR stands for constant bit rate, and whenever you have that, it's not going to vary at all. So if you have some sort of information that needs to be captured that's at a higher rate or lower rate than what you have, it's not going to change at all to capture that. And that's probably one of the lower complexity kinds of bit rate encoding that you can use. The variable bit rate encoding is going to take a little bit longer to render out, but you're going to get better results. So the target bit rate that we're going to be sitting at here is a 5, which actually stands for 5,000, and the maximum bit rate is going to be 10, which is for 10,000. So you have between a 5 and 10,000 megabytes per second window that we're shooting in here, and that's just going to give you better results in the end. So always want to set this one to 5 and 10 whenever we're doing this H.264, just for a really kind of just middle of the road file that you're able to play back easily. So I'll go ahead and say okay to that. And then because we do have audio in this composition, I'm going to come down here to my audio settings and we'll just check that on. And most sites will support 48 kilohertz per second. And since that's what I have here, I want to just go ahead and choose that. And because the audio that we recorded was in stereo, I'll go ahead and keep that stereo setting. If you want to, you can come into your format options, but usually the only thing that I change in here, if I'm not already set to AAC and a high audio quality, is my bitrate settings. So a lot of times I'll come in here and bump that up from the default 128 to 320. So there are some sites that recommend 320 and some it doesn't matter as much. So it's really up to you if you want to change that, and just really do your diligence to figure out what the best settings are for the place that you may end up uploading your video to. Okay, I'll go ahead and click OK on that, and now we're ready to render this out. So I'll go ahead and click OK there. And the last thing that I want to do is to look at where my video is going to be output to. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And this is simply going to be the place that we tell our video to render to. So whether you want to render to your desktop or you have a folder that you're rendering to, right now I'm rendering to a folder on my desktop, and I've just named that folder My Motion Graphics Project. And then you can come down here and change the name of your project. It's automatically going to default to the name of the composition that you're rendering, but you may want to call it something else. So you could call it the name of this course, or maybe just intro project is what we can rename this to. So once you have that title selected, you can go ahead and hit save. And then you're ready to hit render. Now, one of the things that you want to check for is that you are going to be rendering your whole composition. Now, if I only had this work area maybe clipped to this halfway point here before, whenever I was doing all of those RAM previews, it's only going to render this part of the video. So you want to make sure that your entire work area is selected. And then once you're ready to do that, you've already sent everything to the render queue. You can come over here and hit render, and it's going to start rendering out your video, and you'll just be able to see it happening right there. Now, I did a RAM preview earlier, so this render is going really quickly, but if you haven't done a RAM preview, it may take a little bit longer for you, or just really depending how fast your system works. And another thing you can keep in mind is if you hit the caps lock key while you're rendering, it's going to pause this and you won't be able to see any of the frames playing back, and it's going to make your renders go just a little bit faster. So that's just something to keep in mind if you feel like your render's moving really slowly. So now we've rendered out that video, and once you hear a little chime sound, that means that your video is finished, and all of the text here will turn white, and you'll no longer see that progress bar moving across the top. And that's when you know your video is done and you're ready to watch it. So in this lesson, we learned some great settings for rendering the video that we have created for use on the web or our personal computers for playback.